has a soft voice tonight, and if you will, I will tell you a story to sail by a long, gentle journey by lantern light into a place of sea salt, stars, and the rustle of pine. Settle in, breathe slow, rest your hands, and let your thoughts float. We begin long ago, beside a little inlet leaned to the cliff and listened to the sea. Its name was the Admiral Benbow, and on its sign, a brass telescope glinted and pointed out toward the horizon. Here, beneath a low roof, and over a map of small uses and bigger secrets, a boy called Jim Hawkins lived with his mother, tending the bar and the hearth, and keeping his weather eye open for strangers, for danger, and for the kind of adventure that comes by chance. On a winter's afternoon, the sea was gray and close, and down the lane came a man with a sea chest and a gait that marked him as of another world. He was tall and nut brown, and the marks of the ocean sat on him like old tattoos. He sang in a voice that rolled like a barrel down a stair, a wild chorus that spoke of far places and the taste of rum. 15 men on the dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. He called for a glass and tucked his chest within the inn as if it could keep the world at bay. There was a cut across his cheek that told of knives and storms, and a habit, an old sea habit, of watching the road for sailors and sailors with one leg in their step. For days the Captain Bill, the old sea dog, sat in his corner by the fire, whistling, drinking, and holding his saber close like a memory. He spoke little until one evening, a pale, tallow-faced man called Black Dog came to the inn, peering in like a cat. The two men, both long in rum and stories, broke into a sudden clash, steel flashing, chairs overturned, and a tragic retreat that left a notch in the inn's sign, and a silence afterward like a tide pulling back. The captain lay upon the floor as if the sea had turned inside him. Dr. Livesey, a gentleman with a steady hand, and the calm of someone who reads life in pulses, not swords, drew blood to steady the old man's heart. Tattooed upon his arm were lucky words, a gallows sketched as if in grim humor, and the relentless tune of the sea song. Winter kept its chill. The inn held funerals and the hush of small country grief. The captain's pulse went and came like waves, and beside those rhythms came another beat, secret and urgent, the fear of a pale, blind beggar who tapped the earth like a man mapping a road he no longer saw with his eyes. He came with soft, cruel manners and the voice of a wolf. He took the captain's hand and gave him a folded thing, a blackened scrap that told of time's finality. You have till 10 tonight. The phrase hung in the air like a coming tide. And before the second bell, the captain, with a motion like the last of many weary storms, fell and was gone. The house could no longer be quieted by mourning alone. There were things to be done, locks to be turned and opened. Jim and his mother found the captain's sea chest. In it, beneath the clothes that had never been worn and the smoke of a long life at sea, lay a canvas packet that clicked with the sound of metal, gold glinting together like a moth's wings. There was a book of entries, thin fingers of longitude and money stitched with cryptic crosses. There was more remarkable than all, a map no small scrap, but a careful chart with bays and headlands, and a strange red cross that marked a spot, and these whispered directions: Tall Tree, Spyglass Shoulder, Skeleton Island ESC, and by E 10 feet. The map was a shape of promise and a shape of peril. It made men dream and set a zeal burning in one who was already something of an adventurer in his days, Squire Trelawney, who had boxy eyes and a ready cap and a love for distant things. So it was decided they would have a vessel and be gone. The ship was the Hispaniola, modest and sound, a schooner built to move like thought across the sea. Crew were to be gathered. A man with one leg, honest and clever Long John Silver, found his way into the copper-smoked shadows of the Spyglass Tavern and into the heart of the venture, with a grin warm as toast and a parrot on his shoulder, a green thing that said, and meant only 3 words, pieces of 8. The crew that gathered about the squire's business were hardy sorts, men who could turn a rope and stand a watch. Yet the sea hides many things in its folds, and so a certain unease hung like mist over the decks. The captain, Captain Smollett, was a man of virtue and hard command. He looked at the men and the map and the rumpled hopes of softness, and said things that made his employers fidget. He spoke of discipline and distrust, of powder kept where it should not be, of words breathed too wide, and secrets told to the breeze. The squire's broad face flushed. The doctor nodded with the gravity of one who sees longer than the moment, and the ship moved out into the wide. The voyage was fair and full of small actions that grow large only when the heart looks back. Songs in the galley, the sting of salt in the wind, the hush of captain's orders, and the way that men's faces can change in private. One night, while the watch hummed and the world lay as if in sleep, Jim hid in an apple barrel to fetch a bite, and found himself a witness, hidden to a secret like a tarnished coin. He heard the cook, Long John, speak low and sure with other voices about plans, not of the captain's favor. Names were named. Hands, Israel Hands, skilled, dangerous Dick Morgan. And the talk was old and blunt as a belaying pin. We were to seize the ship. We were to find the treasure. We were to go our way. In that small dark between apples and sky, Jim heard plans laid like a net, and he understood with a boy's sharpness how grave the danger was. Long John's voice had a warmth that could have been a lantern, and a coldness that was like a blade's edge. He praised Jim with flattering words, then spoke of duty and of waiting. He had the face of a friend and the teeth of a wolf. When the island came at last into being on the horizon, it rose like a story's backbone. A tall spire called the Spyglass, and a ring of lower hills and trees that hid curious bays. It was an island with the pull of old secrets, the dark hush of a place that has hidden things and keeps them quietly. Anchored in the lee, the Hispaniola slipped within the mouth of a safe harbor. The party went ashore with picks and a map and a song in their mouths. The treasure was close. Silver moved like the wind among his fellows. He had his smiles and his pipe, and the parrot that shrieked for pieces of 8, and set a strange rhythm in the air. Yet something else moved as well, an old, half-crazed man who called himself Ben Gunn, wild at the edges, marooned once, and now a ragged islander who claimed the lonely country as his own. He spoke of goats and cheese with a tenderness that seemed to belong to a house instead of a cave, and he told Jim of Flint, Captain Flint the Terror, the genius of Rapin, who had cached treasure and inspired fear by carving up men's lives like old maps. But this was not only the story of treasure and lonely men. It was the story of courage kept and lost, of small acts that become great. The crew split as the island took them down to the sand. Silver and a band went to hunt the hollow that the map marked. The rest were left upon the ship. Fire and drink and a bitter, fateful cure of wine followed. As Jim crept among willows, the day began to crook, and in the hush of a leafy dell, he found a scene that would make the blood in his boyish veins run cold. He saw 2 men, one leaped like a spring, another like a snake. A fight sharp and driven broke, and the flash of steel and a scream electrified the air. He watched as one man struck another with the butt of a crutch, Long John's crutch, and then thrust a knife twice into lifelessness. The world tilted and turned. Jim's breath went thin and thin again. He fled, and in the running of his feet, he stumbled upon a figure that writhed more like a ghost than a man. It was Ben Gunn. The maroon crouched, eyes like bright stones, told Jim his own tale of having been set ashore, of digging and caching, of living on goats and dreams of cheese, and of the terrible cleverness of those who called themselves captains. He promised, new readable promise, that he had the treasure secret guarded still, that he had carried it to a cave where the earth would keep it safe, and that if the squire and his company were true men, they would come, bring coins, and bring him home. This bright, frightened confession gave Jim a new hope, but it could not stop the storms of blood. The night that came was clouded with mutiny and with gunfire. The log house block by the spring became a garrison of cloth and courage. The Captain Smollett made the brave, severe decisions of a man who understands risk and when to stand. He was wounded in the fighting, and the house was tested to the limits of its plank. The men fighting like dogs and heroes both, the squire and Dr. Livesey and Old Gray, and the others kept the stockade with cunning and violence that came from desperation. Joyce and Hunter, faithful in their way, gave all that was theirs of courage. The mutineers came once, thrice men with a black flag and a crude music, but the defenders held. Bones were laid, and silence fell heavy like a seal. Then Jim, flame-fed by his own fears and the hunger of an adventure he could not yet quit, made a choice both rash and brave. He stole down to the spit at the edge of the bay under cover of the gathering fog, and took Ben Gunn's little coracle, light as a newborn gull. He paddled with the patience of fear, his heart thrumming. He found the ship, the Hispaniola, rolling oddly with loose men and untended watches. The drunken pair on the stern, Brian and Israel hands, was locked in a flighty fight. A single tug of a rope, one cut of a cord, and the ship was free of anchor. The current and the tide took both coracle and schooner in the same tired embrace. The drift pulled them seaward like a dream made of wood and water. Jim could have given up, but the boy's arms held to chance. In the hush of the ship's motion, he climbed in a small, silent panic to her rail and into the cabin, and there the world turned new. The two watchmen lay as if in sleep. The ale bottles clinked, and the deck was a scatter of small destruction and big neglect. The lullaby of the sea blurred Jim's fears into a numbness. He had the means, plenty of means, at first seen only a survival of moving the vessel, steering it to the inlet where the tide might take her high and safe, and thus save the garrison, bring home stores, and right the world again. Israel Hands, wretched with his wound and his own cunning, became a strange ally and a darker threat in the same breath. He promised help with the ship, then turned his knife, and a thunderous, violent fight broke like surf upon the decks. Hands and O'Brien fought, knives flashed, pistols expired in uselessness. And in the dizzy fog of confusion, Jim's hand found the pistol and shot in the quiet of a moment that seemed a lifetime. The coxswain fell dead in a wash of red, and the deck became his grave. Jim left the Hispaniola stranded at last upon the flats. A great, improbable vessel tipped like a slumbering beast, and he came ashore with a heart like a bird caught and a concrete joy under his ribs. He had done what he must, and the garrison might yet be saved. He made his way through the rustle of trees and came, finally, to the log house where his friends had kept watch and had bled in a long day. The stocks of bravery were low. Joyce had died. The squire had borne his dark shame and grief, and the captain lay wounded but alive. The log house spirit had been bought in a coin stamped with each man's sacrifice, yet the island told more stories still. In the night, a voice, thin as a pipe, came across the trees, an echo of a pirate's song. Flint's parrot screeched its cry like an iron clock. Then a man came upon the shore, a man of politeness and varnished ways, who carried a white flag and the patience of an actor. Long John Silver himself. He came to parley and to bargain with the wounded captain and the doctor. It was the strangest kind of intimacy. The cook, the mutineer, could be charming as a lamp and brutal as a knife. He offered terms, join, and be spared, refuse, and be lost. The captain, clear in his duty and blunt as the flint of his name, answered with a seaman's law: make no bargain with thieves. Yet the doctor and Long John had their secret exchange. The doctor went out and spoke at whisper to Silver on the sands, words meant to sound in the souls of men, and returned to the house with plans that would weave a strange net. The following days were when courage looked most like a slow-growing farm crop, patient stubborn, fed by little measures. Silver, though he had shown the hand of a villain, now presented Manor as a man who could save as much as he had ever threatened to take. He kept his face to both sides like a man on a hill with land in every direction. Ben Gunn, the Maroon, began to show the shape of a plan that was kinder in ways than his manner suggested. He had, it turned out, found the cache Flint had planted and moved it to a cave of stone and moss, until he might come again as a man with honest hands. When news went up, it seemed ridiculous and miraculous. The treasure was not lost after all. Yet men's greed is a weather that blows down the best laid plans. The mutineers, jacked with false courage, rushed for the spot. But Gray, the doctor, and Ben had already come to ambush. The treasure hunters leapt into a pit that had been rifled. A shot cracked, and men fell. The mastless, misled mutineers fled across the plateau and toward the boats. At the edge of wilderness and sea we stood and fired. Silver, who had been all smiles and cooperations, showed an old iron nerve and a new want, the saving of his own skin again. At a breath's difference, he might have been our enemy on the sand, but he had also, in those flash-like edges that make men into men, been the hand that protected Jim. So irony and gratitude turned in his face as a wheel. At last we had the real, solid gold in sight. Flint's treasure, a huge, incredible hoard of the world's money, and might lying in bars, and in scattered coins, the shine of kingdoms stacked in the cave. The weight of it seemed to lift the very cave's breath. It was a thing of want and wonder, gold enough to fill dreams and break men's hearts. We loaded and labored, carrying bags and bars to the beach and into the Hispaniola, until our arms ached with the mineral heaviness of centuries, and still there remained more. It took days of transport and the sweat of every hand and the plan of every cunning mind. All the while, the three mutated mutineers, those who had not run and bled, were left to the island, watched, sometimes mocked by a distant life of laughter and song, and finally allowed to stay in a place where the taste of salt would be now and forever their lot. When the moment came to leave, to be lifted by the wind and washed by the meter of ocean swell, Silver was a man of bits and pieces. A secret sack he had tucked away in the dark of a bulkhead, the last greed he took when our watch did not see. Some say that's the thing that kept him going in later years, or else the want of peace. At dawn, seeing that he would be misused by no law that suited him, he slipped away by a shoreboat gone, with the memory of that one leg and the rattle of a parrot's voice. The ship took sail. We were 5 men in all who made it home: Trelawney, Squire and proud, the good doctor, the captain, stern and wounded but alive Gray, who changed like a man who finds his place, and Jim Hawkins, the boy who had hidden in an apple barrel and struck the keynote that turned fate. Ben Gunn went off with 1,000 pounds, and the urge of wandering faded into a rustic life. The captain, as he had always been, retired with the dignity of a soldier who has kept to his charge. And Long John, he was a disappearance the telling, of which still tastes of smoke and iron. Some say he lived and loved and grew soft, and then hard again. Some say he died at the end of a rope. Some even say he redeemed himself in the end. The truth keeps its own bed on the far side of the world, scattered, complicated, fitting to the sea. Now sleep may be upon you. Let your breath slow even as the tide. Breathe in, count to 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Feel the slow turning of the earth and the gentling of the waves. Think of the cove where once a sign with a brass telescope shone, and an inn's windows held candle glow and laughter. Picture the logs by the hearth, the smell of tar and warm bread. Picture the island's night, cold, sand-soft, and silvered by the slow moon. Picture the spyglass hill, cutting a silhouette of stillness, and the pine trees nodding to the sea's long song. Remember the boy who went to sea, whose hands had the salt of adventure upon them. Remember the doctor who kept his head and his bow, and the squire who spent his coins on dreams. And remember a man with one leg, with a smile broad as a market and a parrot upon his shoulder, who could speak both comfort and a threat, like a coin that turned in the light. Sleep now. Let the rhythm of it settle you. Let the stories of seas and island caves and secret maps fold away into a soft box in your mind, where they will keep the small shine of wonder beside the warmth of a hearth. The tide is slow and kind. 15 men may sing on a dead man's chest, but you need only the hush of a pillow and the hush of night to take you safe through. If ever the world is loud again tomorrow, keep this softness with you. Soft breath, soft hands. You are no one's prisoner but your own gentle rest. Good night, good dreams. And when you dream, perhaps you will find yourself, like Jim Hawkins, stepping lightly out of an apple barrel into a sky of stars. Or perhaps you will find the hush of the great spyglass over a quiet sea, where the waves tell old stories, and the treasure is only the knowing of how bravely you can be. Sleep and let the sea keep your dreams.